Hey everybody, welcome back to these behavior evolution scriptures. We're getting on in the book of Kings. We're probably going to be dealing with our last big subject to do with the Temple of Solomon today. So before we say goodbye to that whole theme, which has taken months, it feels like, talking about the temple and the full significance of it, I just want to show you a quick video. We've touched on parts of it. Here we go. And we're going to see what the significance of this temple really is. You can see it all started back. Yahuah wanted to deal, relate, talk to his people. He appeared to Moses through the burning bush. Eventually he gave him the commandments, didn't he? You know that it was all about his love. He wanted to come close to us. Then we saw the pattern of the tabernacle and the sheep and the goats and the slaughterings and the sacrifices. See how small that altar is? And there's the lava there with the washing. And you could go right through the tabernacle, but the priests had to be dressed the right way, didn't they? How lavish is all this? But it's on a dirt floor. It's temporary. They were to move it around. Look at that. Look at the steam, the radiation coming off that. Isn't that amazing? And of course, the fulfillment is what we've been seeing with what David planned and Solomon built through this grand temple. And it's all gold and silver and brass, marble and stone and precious gems. Look at the size of that altar and the lavas. There's 10 of them. Wash basins. You can see just no expense was spared. This would have been, what did we work out? $150 billion. Look how much gold there was. Look at it. Unbelievable. Imagine having on there's that Shekinah, there's that steam radiation coming up, there's the olive cherubim either side overlooking it. This was a symbol of the Garden of Eden, surrounded by olive blossoms and pomegranates and of course the seraphim. So we see now just what David did with this temple site. I mean, now there's a stupid looking dome on it for the Islamic thing going on, but you can see David took over this city and he danced down the street. Look at the significance here, the difference between the size. The temple was double the size of the tabernacle. Amazing stuff. And we know this is all shadowing what Yahuah appeared on earth as, the living dwelling. Everything that this temple had, but had long gone. Because remember in the days of Ezekiel, he took his presence out of the temple in grand, dramatic style. He left because of their idolatry. And it wasn't until 400 or 500 years later that Yahuah appeared with everything that this temple had in it. He had in his body. And of course, that body had to be broken and sacrificed so that the oil, the spirit, could come forth to all his followers. And that's where we see ourselves today in the history. We are this temple, this living dwelling, where the portal dwells, where that radioactivity comes off that arc in our heart to affect anyone around us. I mean, what about the mind? What about the architecture of this? And every single dot, every single screw, every single nail, every single plank, every board, every measurement, all lined up with something that Yahuah did. It all had to do with what Yahuah did. That's why when we've been going through the Gospels, we see the prophet said this and Yahuah did it. The prophet said that. Oh, look at this. Check this out. We're in fast motion now. This is what Solomon did. No, this isn't Solomon here. This is around the time of Abraham. Just before David came and took it over. Ready? David. Here we go. David. I love this video. It just shows what really went on. And of course, now that Solomon's come on the scene, look what he does with the city. Just it flourishes, just expands like 100-fold. Look at the grandiose, amazing. We know all about this now because we've been dealing with the scriptures on it. The Palace of Lebanon. There's his throne of judgment where he ruled. And he built his palace for his first wife, which was the Egyptian queen. There it is here, daughter of the Pharaoh in there. The royal court, he had his own palace. Then we had the first temple. So I don't want you to lose the gravity of this. This is just this was like 2,000 years in the planning, really, as far as the... I mean, Yahuah was content with a tent. He was content with a tent. Of course, he wanted the garden, if you really want to know. But it was David who was obsessed with building him a house. Why should I be in this royal house and not you? So Solomon built it. Now we're going to hit it into fast motion again, because we're going to see over history what happened to this temple. It got destroyed. They went into Babylonian captivity. They came back. They built it again. There was nothing in there. No presents. The presents didn't come back. But by the time, look here, by the time Yahushua came along, look at the temple now. It's a major landmark. That's why people were marveling at the design. Unbelievable, isn't it, what they've done? But of course, not long after that, the movement died out. The apostles died. Disciples all killed off. The movement died. Catholicism, early stages of it, from the catechetical school of Alexandria came along. Then we entered the Byzantium. Look at the dome to Shiva. The dome to Shiva. That had nothing to do with Muslims. That was all Catholicism. Look at this. But as we see, Byzantium era, the Arabs come along then. They took over, because by this stage Rome had divided into two, and they took back half of it, and the Arabs took over. And you can see that there's been problems in this area ever since. So you go back into fast forward again. We can see this is the same. That dome is still there today, and we'll see that in a minute. See? Look at it today. It's still the same. No matter who thinks they run the place, it's still got an Arab dome sitting on top of it. The Dome of Shiva. And we're going to be getting into that a little bit in our next video. Okay, so let's get into our study today, because it's finally the dedication of the temple. I just wanted to take you through that short, fast-forwarded video just to see the grandiosity of what Solomon has done. I mean, just look at this picture here. This is an artist's rendition, but just look at the scale of it. When you look at the size of the people, there's gold, precious stones and bricks, and there's no point having any of this, and Solomon knew this at this point, no point having any of this if there's smoke, divine smoke, if the presence of Yahuah did not arrive. And this was the nervousness of Solomon. I've gone to all this trouble. What if Yahuah doesn't like it? What if he doesn't come into the temple? I mean, he didn't come into any of the other temples later on, so there's a high chance he may not come into this one either. But the difference is that Solomon was working off his father's plans, his father's blueprints, and his father heard it all from Yahuah. Let's get into it. After the temple of Yahuah was completed, Solomon waited around 11 months to dedicate it. He waited nearly a year. Just sat there looking like this with no presents in it. Why would he wait a year? Interesting. He waited 11 months to dedicate it because he was waiting for the Day of Atonement to arrive in the 7th month, so that the Ark of the Blood Covenant, remember, could be placed into the newly built set-apart oracle, so that the temple could become fully functional. Because as we know, no ark, no presence, no point of having a temple. But also, only one person, he wasn't going to make the same mistake his dad made, only one person, the high priest, was ever authorized to enter that set-apart chamber, and just as importantly, only on one specific day per year, atonement. How are we going to get the presence of Yahuah into the temple, which is represented by the ark? If we can't touch the ark, the only one who can touch the ark is the high priest. You can only do it once a year. We better wait for that day then, isn't it? That appointed time, that Moedim. So the temple couldn't be dedicated and anointed, unless the ark was in the most set apart place. And that couldn't happen except on the 10th day of the 7th month of the year. So the wait of 11 months from the date of the temple's completion to the date that it could be dedicated was so that the next Day of Atonement could arrive and the high priest could enter the most set apart oracle to place the Ark of the Blood Covenant there. Remember, as David discovered the hard way, No one dared to presume when it came to handling the precious, dangerously radioactive ark of Yahuwah's presence. Wasn't that amazing footage of the warped air, the radiation coming off the ark in that video? That's what it would have been like, which means that must be what we're like. The two dwelling complexes, the one for Yahuwah and the one for the king, the temple and the palace, constructed on the Temple Mount, were far from ordinary. The temple and the palace together had an extraordinary symbolism that not only showed an organic connection between the two, but also the new reality of their very existence. The new reality of their very existence marked the end of the time of Yisrael being in an unsettled condition. What are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that there's a temple, huge big ass temple, and a huge big ass palace right next to each other. Yeah? This had huge significance. It was the reality of having these two things, showed the very existence, marked the end. It marked the end of the time of Yisrael being in an unsettled condition. You got a big place of worship like that and a big palace like that, you are no longer wanderers without a nation, without a land, are you? The temporary wilderness tabernacle was in tatters after 400 years, and King Solomon was the anointed earthly king over Yahuwah's kingdom. In the Torah, Yisrael's king was not to be a monarch in the typical Middle Eastern or Oriental or even later European sense of it. It wasn't to be a typical monarch in usual earthly sense of it. That is, the earthly king being over Yisrael was not to be a dictator figure, but rather Yahuwah's servant, set over Yisrael merely to carry out Yahuwah's will, his divine laws and covenant. And this is why the construction of Solomon's palace, immediately adjacent to the temple, was necessary in order to illustrate this special arrangement and connectedness between Yahuwah and the king. The king was to be the nation's servant, not its slave driver, not like the Pharaoh, not a big dictatorship, no, a kind-hearted servant. So with all that behind us, footage, videos, bit of theory, let's go into 1 Kings chapter 8. Because finally, after all this work, this temple is going to be dedicated. That was the word I was looking for in the last video. Dedicated. Then King Solomon told all the elders of Yisrael, the heads of the tribes, and the leaders of the families of Yisrael to come together in Jerusalem, for he wanted them to join in moving the ark of Yahuwah's blood covenant from the city of David, Zion, up to the temple. So during the Feast of Booths, here we are, the whole Feast of Booths, in the 7th month, all the men of Yisrael came to the meeting with King Solomon, talking about the last harvest time of the year. Not Pentecost, not Passover earlier on, it's the latter Feast of Booths. The Feast of Tabernacles was a pilgrimage festival that required all adult males in Israel, regardless of social status, to journey to the temple. Therefore, all the dignitaries were present. All the adult males of Israel were also present, and all classes of society came to the temple dedication and stayed for the Feast of Tabernacles. See how the Feast of Tabernacles begins at trumpets, and then 10 days later you've got the Day of Atonement. That was the day that Solomon was waiting for. But they're all there for this whole time of the year. They're all gathered. When all the elders of Israel arrived, the priests and Levites carried the set-apart ark of Yahuwah up to the temple, as well as the tabernacle tent and all the set-apart utensils that were in it. The tabernacle tent, which is the remnant of the wilderness tabernacle that had been resting in Gibeon up to now. So that wasn't just chucked in the bin, that was precious. Moses' tabernacle, what was left of it. So not only the ark, but also the tent and the set-apart utensils that were with it, were carried all up. King Solomon and all Israel met together before the ark of the blood covenant and sacrificed so many sheep and cattle that no one was able to count them all. I bet he did. If you're shipping the ark of the blood covenant from A to B to C to D, you'd be sacrificing. This is what David did too. You'd be sacrificing every few steps, wouldn't you? Just to make sure nothing was done inappropriately or no one died. This is like moving an atomic bomb. It could kill everybody. This was divine. The priests carried the ark of Yahuwah's blood covenant, remember, on their shoulders, inside to the most set apart oracle, which in Hebrew is called the speaking place. Thought that was interesting. The most set apart place. In other translations it calls it the oracle. It actually means the speaking place. That's what it says in the BYNV too. Place of speaking in the temple, under the wings of the cherubim. The wings of the cherubim spread out over the set apart ark, and they covered the set apart ark and its carrying poles. They covered it up. No one was allowed to look at it. The poles are still there today. They are too long for most. They are too long for the most set apart place. So anyone standing in the set apart place can see the ends of the poles, although no one outside can see them. The only things inside the set apart ark were the 2 tablets that Moses put there at Mount Horeb. This is where Yahuwah made his blood covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt. A lot of controversy over this verse here, where it says the only thing inside the ark was the stone tablets, because later on Paul states in Hebrews that the ark also had the pot of manna and Aaron's staff that budded. However, they could have merely been placed before the ark. The scripture says that they were placed before the ark, as Torah states, that's what it says, so they may not have actually been physically inside the ark. So, what does that say about all their traditions and their oral laws and all their, many things? There's only 2 things that were remaining inside this ark. They were the 10 words, the marriage vows, the everlasting blood covenant. When the priests came out of the set apart place, the cloud filled Yahuwah's temple. So they just put the ark in there and they just made it out, and the place was filled with Yahuwah's cloud, so that the priests couldn't continue their work in Yahuwah's house, because the temple was filled with the esteem power of Yahuwah. What about this? The priests couldn't even serve. The cloud was so luminous that its presence felt as though it was pressing down with irresistible pressure, forcing the priests to leave. There is nothing to indicate that Solomon or the priests were expecting this. On the other hand, it must have been so very welcomed, especially by the king. After all, King Solomon had expended years of effort and enormous sums of money on this house for Yahuwah. What if Yahuwah didn't accept it? But with the appearance of the cloud, not only did Solomon and all who were there have visible proof that Yahuwah would happily dwell there, but this was also the real dedication of the facility. Because just like Moses' tabernacle, he's doing the same thing again. To dedicate means to set apart for Yahuwah, to separate and consecrate and declare divinely pure. Once he has touched it with his divinity, it now belongs to him. It's kind of been placed under the ban. You don't tamper with it. You certainly don't approach. If you're unclean, you can't do that. It's now almost part of his, I wouldn't say it's part of his dimension, but he's taken back a little part of his earth. It's his. So if you touch it, you're dead. Yeah? It's because it's been, look, the smoke and shortly the fire as well. He is sealing this as his. To dedicate means to set something apart for Yahuwah. That obviously happens at our immersion. So you better understand the significance of this, guys. The dedication of the temple. Your temple is dedicated at your immersion. repentance and immersion. All the filth is taken out. You're washed clean by the blood of the Lamb, and you receive a new heart, a new spirit. And he writes, just like the ark with the stone tablets inside it, inside the oracle, the speaking place of the temple. That all happens in here. Heart circumcised, taken out, thrown away, new heart, new spirit, 10 words written on your heart. This is the speaking place. We think from our heart. Speaking place. The cloud that appeared in the temple was not meant to cause terror, but rather awesome reverence. We often hear of Yahuah appearing in a cloud, like the one that led Israel through the wilderness, throughout the scriptures. When Yahushua ascended, it was no cheap phrase to say that he rose into the clouds until he became obscured by them, zipped into those dimensions, went from terrestrial to celestial. So the idea of calling whatever this presence of Yahuah is in the temple a cloud, that's how the authors call it. Well, that's what the author's calling it, a cloud. The idea of calling it a cloud is to try and describe an indeterminate form. We can certainly see a cloud, but we can't really touch it or even assign it a definite shape, can we? And this goes hand in hand with Yahuah refusing to allow manufactured images of him. Because unlike all the false gods and goddesses populating the world's societies, which were fashioned after humans or animals, Yahuah bears no form whatsoever that could ever be captured or properly defined in human terms, or even come close within our four-dimensional universe. Not at this stage in history anyway. We know that Yahushua solved that problem of putting a face to Yahuah. He is the face. He is the body. He is the living temple. And this is a picture I tinkered with because I couldn't find any pictures of this emanating blue cosmic light coming off the ark. And I wanted to see this is an indeterminate form. That's why they called it a cloud. Isn't that amazing what would have been going on? This is what they saw coming off the ark in David's tent. That's why at the Jerusalem Council, James gets up and talks about David's tent, saying it was available for all the nations. And you ratbag carpetbaggers are trying to put laws and heavy yokes on people. Get stuffed, you know. Yahushua's out. He's hitting the streets. Join the program. So what's happened? This cloud has gone through, coming out. They're all blown away. Then Solomon said, Yahuah causes the sun to shine in the sky, but he chooses to live in a dark cloud. Now, Yahuah, I have built a beautiful temple for you, where you may live forever. Then King Solomon turned towards the Israelites who were standing there and asked Yahuah to bless them. And he prayed this long prayer, it's very long, to Yahuah. Yahuah, the Elohim of Israel, is great. He has done what he promised my father David when he said, I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, but I had not yet chosen a city from among the tribes of Israel for a house to rest my name. And I had not chosen a man to be leader over my people Israel. But now I have chosen Jerusalem to be the city of my name, and I've chosen David to rule over my people Israel. My father David wanted desperately to build a house for the name of Yahuah, the Elohim of Israel. But Yahuah said to my father, I know that you want very much to build me a house, and that's a good thing, but you are not the one to build my house, but your son will definitely do it. So Yahuah has kept his promise, and I am the king now in place of my father David. I rule the people of Israel as Yahuah promised, and I have built the house for Yahuah, the Elohim, mighty one, mighty master, the mighty master of Israel. I have made a place in the temple for the set-apart ark, and inside it is the blood covenant of Yahuah, made with our ancestors when he brought them out of Egypt. How inspired would he have been? How excited to have Yahuah's stamp of approval with the cloud and the presence. Then Solomon stood in front of the whole assembly of Israel and faced Yahuah's altar. Solomon then spread his hands and looked towards heaven and said, Yahuah, Elohim of Israel, there is no one like you in heaven or on the earth. You keep the everlasting blood covenant that you made with your people. You are kind and loyal to those who follow you with all their heart. You made a promise to your servant, my father David, and you kept that promise. You made that promise with your own mouth and with your own hands. You made it come true today. Now, Yahuah, Elohim of Israel, please keep the other promises you made to your servant David, my father, when you said, David, if your sons carefully obey me as you did, you will always have someone from your family ruling the people of Israel. Again, Yahuah of Israel, I ask you to keep the promise you made to your servant, my father David. He really wants that promise kept, doesn't he? Because he wants to stay, him and his family, to stay on the throne. Solomon's prayer states that the maintaining of the blood covenant and the kindness with his nation of Israel is conditional on them living in his presence with all of their consciousness, heart, mind, being, all of it, consciousness, everything you are. Therefore, Yahuah will only show his kindness to Israel and bestow the blessings contained within his blood covenant to the nation, provided they obey him and walk in his ways. Cease doing so, and the blessings are yanked, and Yahuah's kindness turned to discipline and judgment. Don't forget that. That is an everlasting Yahuah principle pattern. Stop obeying me. Go your own way. All the blessings are yanked, mate. What was once blessing and kindness turns to discipline and judgment. But, Solomon continues, O mighty Yahuah, can you really live here with us on the earth? The whole sky and the highest heaven cannot contain you. So certainly this temple that I've built cannot hold you either. But please listen to my prayer and my request, for I am your servant, and you are Yahuah, my Elohim. Hear this prayer that I'm praying to you today. In the past you said, I will be honored, for my name is there. So please watch over this house night and day, and please listen to my prayer as I turn towards this house and pray to you. And please listen to our prayers in the future when I and your people Israel turn to this place and pray to you. We know that you live in heaven. We ask you to hear our prayer there and forgive us. Solomon recognizes that Yahuah is not a man who, because of being trapped in a physical body, in a physical terrestrial sphere of space-time, can only be in one place at once. He realizes Yahuah is not restricted like that. For Yahuah is everywhere at once. He doesn't pack his bags and travel down from heaven in order to visit the temple on occasion, thus vacating his throne in heaven for a time. He is omnipresent, meaning he's in all places, all times, past, present, and future, and all dimensional spheres all at once. He's also omnipotent, all-powerful, and omniscient, all-knowing. Even our deepest thoughts and desires, he knows everything, sees everything, is everywhere. The purpose for a temple was not typical of what was universally accepted in the 10th century BC. This is interesting. Rather, Yahuah's true home was heaven. And yet Yahuah's earthly presence was obvious and even visible, in this case in the form of a cloud that literally drove the priests out of the sanctuary building. Further, Yahuah's definition of a temple was in many ways an enormous shift from what humans of that era imagined, because it was thought by one and all that a temple virtually housed and even shut in the gods and goddesses who chose to reside there, much like a bottle that imprisoned a genie. That's how they felt about their deities. They were territorial and they were stuck in the building you put them in. So you couldn't go too far away from them, otherwise you'd have to take the idols with you. But this is why Solomon's sort of grappling with the idea of, can you even be in this temple? Aren't you out there? And he's come a lot further than the rest of civilization, though, with his understanding. Solomon realized that for Yahuah and for his worshippers, the temple was merely a place of meeting. And even that was not something that could be well defined. While the Torah law had requirements for attendance at the temple on certain occasions, prayers directed from anywhere towards the temple were just as effective as if one was standing in its courtyards. This is what they understood at the time. They didn't have the Spirit within them. So everything was very still hocus pocus, cosmic, pagan-like, spiritualistic, superstitious. Solomon continues, those who wrong others will be brought to this altar. If they are not guilty, they will make an oath and promise that they are innocent. Please listen from heaven and judge them. If they are guilty, please show us that they are guilty. And if they're innocent, please show us that they are not guilty. Sometimes your people Israel will sin against you, and their enemies will defeat them. Then the people will come back to you and praise you. They will pray to you in this temple. Please listen in heaven. Please listen to the prayers of your people Israel. Forgive them for their sins and let them have their land again, for you gave this land to their ancestors. Sometimes they will sin against you, and you will stop the rain from falling on their land, and they will pray towards this place, speaking and praising your name again. You make them suffer, and they will be sorry for their sins. So please listen in heaven to their prayer. Then forgive us for our sins and teach the people to walk in your good ways. Then, Yahuah, please send rain to the land you gave them. The land might become very dry and no food will grow in it, or maybe a great sickness will spread among the people. Maybe all the food that is growing will be destroyed by insects, or your people might be attacked in some of their cities by their enemies, or many of your people might get sick. When any of these things happen and the people feel compelled in their hearts to spread their hands in prayer towards this house, please listen to their prayer. Listen while you're in your dwelling place of heaven and forgive them and help them. Only you know what people are really thinking, so only you can judge them fairly. Do this so that your people will fear and respect you all the time that they live in this land that you gave to your ancestors. Foreigners from other places will hear about your greatness and power and come from far away to pray at this house. From your dwelling place of heaven, please listen to their prayers. Please do everything the people from other places ask you also. Then they will fear and respect you the same as your people here in Israel. Then all people everywhere will know that I built this mighty house for your name to rest. Sometimes you will command your people to go and fight against their enemies. Then your people will turn towards the city that you have chosen and the house that I built in your name, and they will pray to you, Yahuah. Please listen to their prayers from your dwelling place of heaven and help them. Your people will sin against you. I know this because everyone sins, and you will be angry with your people. You will let their enemies defeat them. Their enemies will make them prisoners and carry them to some faraway land. This is like a prophecy, isn't it? And in that faraway land, your people will think about what happened, and they will be sorry for their sins, and they will pray to you again. They will say, we have sinned and done wrong. They will be in that faraway land of their enemy, but they will turn back to you. They will feel sorry for their sins with all their heart and being. They will turn towards the land you gave their ancestors. They will look towards the city you chose and towards the house I built, and they will pray to you. Please listen to their prayers from your special dwelling place of heaven and do what's right. Forgive your sinful people for all the things they've done against you. Make their enemies be kind to them. Remember that they are your people, your inheritance, and that you brought them out of Egypt, that hot furnace. Please listen to my prayers and to the prayers of your people Israel. Listen to their prayers any time that they ask you for help. You have chosen them from all the people of the earth to be your own special inheritance, Yahuah. You promised to do that for us. You used your servant Moses to make that promise when you brought our ancestors out of Egypt. How many times did he say the word prayer? Pray, hear from heaven, do what's right, pray, prayer. It looks to me like this, I'm just thinking now, this is a house of prayer. Isn't that what Yahushua said when he cracked a whip and drove out all the street merchants and carpetbaggers? This is a house of prayer. This is a beacon of light that people were supposed to, all this, when they're in captivity, when they've sinned, when they're wrong, when they're hard done by, when everything, they can look to the temple and know that Yahuah is there and that they can talk to him. It's a reminder that Yahuah is there. He loves you and he wants to talk to you. That's the purpose of a temple, to be a beacon, a reminder to people that Yahushua loves you. Aren't we that temple now? The house of prayer, the house of communication. I hope you're all communicating with Yahushua about everything. Otherwise, what's the point of your temple? What's the point of you being a temple? Now, I want to add a little bit here, because that's the end of the chapter. Right there is the end of 1 Kings chapter 8. And then it goes on next chapter to something else. But as we know, what happened to this fire? Now, an important event has been left out of this event in 1 Kings 8, but we do find it recorded in 2 Chronicles 7. So before we wrap up this whole event of the dedication, more happened on this day that not written in Kings, but it was written in Chronicles, which is pretty much a mirror image of many of the events. Because not only was there the smoke, the radiation, Shekinah, filling the house, what shot down from heaven? What would that have looked like? Coming out of the sky. It would have had to come out of the sky. It came out of, through the invisible seam. It came from one dimension to another. This was divine fire. That's why anything used from this fire was now set apart, because the fire didn't come from this dimension. And everything was sprinkled with blood first. So blood and fire. When Solomon finished praying, so you saw how long that prayer was. He was there for a while. When Solomon finished praying, fire came down from the sky and burnt up the ascending near offering and the sacrifices, and the esteem of Yahuah filled the temple. And the priests could not enter Yahuah's temple because the esteem cloud of Yahuah filled it. So that was in the last text. That was there. They couldn't serve because of the temple, the smoke. But we didn't hear about the fire, did we? When all the Israelites saw the fire come down from heaven and the esteem of Yahuah on the temple, they bowed down on the pavement with their faces low to the ground, as you would, worshipping and thanking Yahuah, singing, "For Yahuah is good, and his loving kindness will last forever." For Yahuah is good, and his loving kindness will last forever. Isn't that just the most amazing picture? That's what happens to us when we get the incorruptible seed within us, guys. That fire of his presence, that seed, immortal, incorruptible seed comes within us. And it starts from the inside out, burning like that fire. Burning out all the uncleanness. Does this all sound familiar? Think back to Moses and the tabernacle. Of course, the unchanging Yahuah dedicated Solomon's temple of stone and wood in Jerusalem in the same way he did the portable one made of fabric, animal skins and wood at the foot of Mount Sinai. And by repeating this pattern, the people knew. By not changing, by repeating the pattern, the people knew that Yahuah pronounced this temple, this house, acceptable. And now it had been purified. Purified, mate. This was a supernatural event, guys. This didn't happen. That's why everyone was just off their rocker, excited. When Solomon prayed to Yahuah, he was on his knees in front of Yahuah's altar and his arms were raised towards heaven. That wasn't the end of the chapter, sorry. We've got a little bit more. 2 more paragraphs. When Solomon prayed to Yahuah, he was on his knees in front of Yahuah's altar and his arms were raised towards heaven. When he finished praying, he stood up. Then in a loud voice, he asked Yahuah to bless all the people of Israel, saying, "Praise Yahuah. He promised to give rest to his people, Israel, and he has given us rest. He used his servant Moses and made many good promises to the people of Israel, and he has kept every one of them. I pray that Yahuah our Elohim will be with us, as he was with our ancestors. I pray that he will never leave us. I pray that we will turn to him and follow him. Then we will obey all his laws, decisions, and commands that he gave our ancestors. I pray that Yahuah our Elohim will always remember this prayer and what I have asked. I pray that he will do these things for his servant, the king, and for his people Israel. I pray that he will do this every day. Do this every day. If he will do these things, all the people of the world will know that Yahuah is the only true Elohim. You people must be loyal and true to Yahuah, our Elohim. You must always follow and obey all of his laws and commands. You must continue to obey in the future as you do now. King Solomon invokes Moses' name and reminds the people that what is happening here is all part of the blood covenant that Yahuah has made with Moses 500 years earlier. Yahuah was with Israel because he said he would be, and their many victories over their enemies and the fact that they are now at rest in the land of Canaan, participating in this dedication celebration, is experiential proof of Yahuah's promise of his mysterious presence being with them. But there was another strong implication in what Solomon was saying, for it was important for the people to understand that now that the temple was completed and dedicated, and that all of Yahuah's promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about arriving and settling in Canaan had been met, that Yahuah would not leave them to themselves. He didn't want Yahuah to leave them to themselves. So Solomon prayed aloud in front of the people that Yahuah would not abandon them, just as he had not abandoned their patriarchs. Then King Solomon and all the Israelites with him offered sacrifices to Yahuah. Solomon killed 22,000 cattle, 120,000 sheep as intimate peace offerings to Yahuah. In this way, the king and the people showed that they had dedicated the temple to Yahuah. King Solomon also dedicated the yard right in front of Yahuah's temple. He offered ascending near offerings, love grain offerings, and the fat from the animals that were used as intimate peace offerings. Then King Solomon made these offerings in the yard because the bronze altar in front of Yahuah's was way too small to hold them all. So there at the temple, King Solomon and all the people of Israel celebrated this festival, and people came from as far as Hamath Pass in the north and the border of Egypt in the south. This huge crowd of people ate, drank, and enjoyed themselves together with Yahuah for 7 days, because that's the length of the feast, booths. Then they stayed for another 7 days after that. The next day, Solomon told the people to go home. All the people thanked the king and said goodbye and went home. They were happy because of all the good things that Yahuah had done for David, his servant, and for his people Israel. All up, the throngs of people remained in Jerusalem for 15 days total, which must have been something to behold. No doubt they camped out for miles around the city. And we'll finish on this bit here. So Solomon finished Yahuah's temple and the king's palace. Solomon did everything that he had planned to do in building a house for Yahuah and for himself. Then Yahuah appeared to Solomon at night. Here we go. Solomon has done all this praying to Yahuah, and that night Yahuah has appeared to Solomon. So we'll finish on this, guys. Yahuah said, Solomon, I have heard your prayer, and I have chosen this place for myself to be a house for sacrifices, a house for slaughterings. When I close the sky so that there is no rain, or command the locust to destroy the land, or send sicknesses to my people, and if my people who are called by my name become humble and pray and look for me and turn away from their evil ways, then I will hear. He's confirming, he's agreeing with Solomon, he's saying, I will hear if they do all this. If they humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes are open and my ears will pay attention to the prayers prayed in this place. I have chosen this temple. Take this all onto yourself, guys. I have chosen this temple. I have made it a set apart place, so I will be honored there forever. My name will rest here, and I will watch over it and think of it always. You must serve me with a pure and honest heart, just as your father David did. You must obey my laws and do everything that I commanded you. If you obey all I have commanded, and if you obey my laws and rules, then I will make you a strong king. We're kings and priests, aren't we? He'll make us strong, and our kingdom will be great. That is the blood covenant I made with David your father when I told him that Israel would always be ruled by one of his descendants. But if you don't obey my laws and commands that I gave you, and if you worship other deities and serve them, then I will take the Israelites out from my land that I gave them, and I will leave this temple that I have made set apart for my name. I will make this temple something that all the nations will speak evil about. Well, that's happening today, isn't it? In the Middle East. Do you want the nations to be speaking evil about you? Then don't fall into idolatry, disobedience, wickedness, unclean. Everyone who sees it will be amazed. They will ask, why did Yahuah do this terrible thing to this land and to this temple? People will say, this happened because they left Yahuah, the Elohim of their ancestors. He brought them out to Egypt. He brought them out of Egypt. But they decided to follow other deities. They began to worship and serve those deities. That is why he caused all these bad things to happen to them. That is why he caused all these bad things to happen to them. Take a look at your life, brothers and sisters, at all the bad things that have happened. Who's in control of it all? Demons? No, Yahushua. Half of its consequences, and the other half he's trying to get your attention. Look at yourself and what you have done in this temple, in your body, in his face. It's very serious, guys. Judgment's coming on the world. That's long enough for this video. We're going to move on with Solomon next week and see what adventures he has to do. He's not around for much longer in 1 Kings. He dies soon. There's not a lot written. Love you guys. Remember, you are the living temple, a house of prayer, a house of communication. So get in there and talk to him about everything and hear my sheep, hear my voice. You can hear him.
Check it out. Check it out. Ain't it funkin' now? Ain't it funkin' now? Ain't it funkin' now? Ain't it funkin' now? Check it out.
Get with it, can't think quit it, stomp on a stoop when I hear funk blue playing pop pipe, follow her to shoot, baby, just sing about the groove. Sing it. The groove is in the heart. Groove is in the heart. Groove is in the heart. Groove is in the
Oh, y'all are crazy, man.